ignore that. Hi. So that test didn't go so well. For you, I assume, if you're watching this video. So I'm going to make this first video about section 1A. Now I've already plotted the points. Hopefully you did that okay. If your triangle looks different than this, that may have caused problems on all the rest of these questions. So check that first. Remember, x value 7, then the y value -4, and so forth. Okay, so real quickly, I've already written out the distances. Most of you did pretty well on that on the quiz, but just in case you're not sure, what I did, I used the Pythagorean theorem. That just means I counted the rise and the run. You could have also subtracted the x values and subtracted the y values to get the rise and the run, and you would call it the distance formula, but it's the exact same thing. So, to find the distance from A to B, I did the run squared, which is 13, which is the difference between 7 and -6, and then the rise squared, which is 5. So 13 squared plus 5 squared equals the distance squared. Thank you. And then from there, we'll square each of those, add them together, then take the square roots. And because we want the exact answer, we're going to leave that as the square root of 194. Okay, for number 2, the distance from A to C. So our rise is 10, our run is 2. And again, I just counted. You could also subtract for A to C the x values. They have a difference of 2. The y values have a difference of 10. So it's 2 squared plus 10 squared equals the distance squared. That's the hypotenuse of our right triangle. Okay, and so that's 4, that's 100, 4 plus 100 is 104, and the square root of 104 does not have a nice pretty simplification, so just leave it as the square root of 104. That is the exact answer. And then for number 3, similarly, we're going to get a run of 11 and a rise of 5. So there's 5 squared. It doesn't matter which order you put those in. Here I did the rise squared plus the run squared. It's the same thing. You can add things in different orders. It's the same. So that's 25, that's 121, add them together, 149, and keep the square root because 149 does not have a nice pretty square root. Now to find the perimeter, which is what we're asked about in this question, you need to add all 3 of those distances together. And what you don't want to do is add the numbers under the square root together and then take the square root. That is not how the order of operations works. A square root is the same as an exponent. It's got to come before addition. So type each of those in your calculator or type it all in your calculator at the same time, and you should get about 36.3. Now, let's talk about finding the equation of line AC. So it tells you here to put it in point-slope form. You should have been able to figure that out anyway, because all I have are these 2 points. So I have the point A, I have the point C. So the points, okay, we have that information taken care of. Oh, but it doesn't tell us the slope. But wait, I can just use the rise and the run to find the slope of line AC. The slope would be, now here, this would be a -10. I didn't call it -10 earlier because when it gets squared, it would cancel out anyway. But the rise is -10, the run is 2. So my slope would be -10 over 2. And again, that's for line AC only. And that's going to reduce to -5. So I have a point, and I have my slope. I can use either point I want, either A or C. They're both on the line. I'll use the point C. So I'm going to use slope-intercept form. So that's going to be y minus, this one right here, y1, which would be the y value for whichever point I use. I decided to use C, equals m, that's the slope, -5 times x minus x1. So since I'm using this point, I want to make sure I use that same x value. So x minus, and then the x value is 5. That's point-slope form. I'm done. Don't keep working. Except on the next problem. Okay, so number 5 is also part of this section. For number 5, we want to find the midpoint of line AC. So again, the same line, AC, and I gave you the midpoint formula on the board. It's just the average of the x values, add them together and divide by 2. that would be the x value of the midpoint, and then the average of the y values. Add them together in either order and divide by 2. So again, I'm using points A and C because we want the midpoint between A and C. So I'm going to use those two x values. So I might say 7 plus 5. I'm averaging. Add them together, then divide by 2. So what's halfway between 7 and 5? Well, it's 6. That's the average. And then for the y values, negative 4 plus 6. So that's going to be 12 divided by 2, which is 6, which makes sense. It's halfway in between those two x values. And then for the y values, negative 4 plus 6 would be 2, positive 2 divided by 2, which is 1, which again makes sense. Which again makes sense because it is halfway between these two y values. So the point, let's plot it and make sure it's actually on our line. Point 6, 1 would be right there. Does it look like the midpoint? It does. So look at your answer and make sure it looks right. There's our midpoint right there.